Hello, I'm Andrew McNeillie, and I'm talking to you from my office, the headquarters of the Clutag Press. Rather than go into details about the Clutag Press, you can just go and Google it and find out for yourselves what it has done. But among the things it has done is publish Geoffrey Hill, Anne Stevenson, Michael Longley, quite a lot of others, including, last but not least, Paul Batchelor. I published Paul's The Love Dog, and I'm delighted to see that it figures considerably in his new book, The Acts of Oblivion, about which I am now embarked on an essay, a 2,500 word essay for the Oxford Review of Books. It is the big standout book of poems for me, and so I'm delighted to have a chance to weigh it up and try to see what I make of it. The main publication of the press is the magazine Archipelago, and Archipelago has an agenda. It addresses what I call the unnameable archipelago of Britain and Ireland, and it's about the wilder parts, the extremities of the archipelago, the combined archipelago, as it were. And I realise that that has been my preoccupation right from my teenage, and from before really, but from my teenage in North Wales. And it is to be found or reflected in my first book of poems, Nevermore, which has a sister volume, a memoir, called An Aran Keening, which is an account of the all but a year that I spent on Inishmore, one of the Aran Islands, in 1968-69. So when I came to try to compile my collected poems, I'm relieved to find that there seems to be a consistent address towards that subject across the poems. There are other sorts of poems there, but that's the main trajectory and the main preoccupation. So there is a kind of cohesion which is rewarding to observe in a task that is very difficult to perform, and at times quite dismaying, but overall a great privilege to have to do. I've called my volume Striking a Match in a Storm. That comes from a little poem I wrote called A Poet 21st Century, which goes simply this way. A redundant lighthouse keeper, striking a match in a storm. That seems to me to be about the best way of summing up the influence of poetry these days in the great welter of the internet and the whelming of so much production in words by so many people. Redundant lighthouse keeper, at your service. I want to read a poem that comes from or speaks back to my time on Aran. And it comes from a little book that I didn't do with Carcanet, but with a small press called the Guillemot Press. And the book was called Making Ends Meet. And that poem, the title poem, is the one I'm going to read to you. Since you ask, I think of a door into the light. Light enough to make me blink and rub the sleep from my eyes. Limestone light, backlit by sea. Light like a shadow falling outside in on a stone floor. And a kettle rattling to life, loud as shingle, its breath billowing like my own, as I lean there in the jam, sipping hot tea. Savouring sea light in those days when the island still worked for a living, at sea or ashore, or caught the boat for nevermore. The tide out below, and the early worm already turning in a bird's gut, like the one thought in my head of lines to set and bait to put a poem on my plate by evening. Do I miss it? I have to own up, I do. Though I have the best of it wherever I go, and the rest of it is everywhere still, struggling to make ends meet. There now. I think you've probably had enough of me by now. It's been a pleasure to meet you.